Robbie Thorpe has worked in film and television, firstly as an editor and later as both a producer and a director for over 30 years. Feature films Robbie has produced includes Gums and Noses, Josie, and Material, released in February 2012, and Tell Me Sweet Something, released this year. Overall, South Africa has a vibrant film industry that is growing in reputation and is competitive internationally. But there are challenges. Well, to discuss the industry further and talk about his successes in this field, Robbie Thorpe joins me in studio. Welcome and congratulations on your latest movie. How was it received?
Thanks very well. Yeah, it's done good, done very good. It's done above everybody's expectations, I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, our opening weekend was bigger than Tsotsi, so
fantastic.
Somebody told me that today.
How do you measure,
money?
Success,
Measured
money?
In money, yeah. So we did R1 million in the first 10 days, so that's pretty good. So yeah, we're excited, but we've already moved on to the next thing, We're already doing the next film.
Which is?
Well, I'm doing a film about the Duzi Canoe Marathon, actually. It's about two very unlikely characters, a delinquent guy from an informal settlement and a school teacher who do the doozy together. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
What do producers do exactly?
We just collect all the money. We sit at home and do nothing.
That's the best job.
No, producers is the kind of the father of the project, if you like. The producer decides what film's going to be made, how the film's going to be made, who's going to make it, ultimately makes all the big decisions. So it's like having a child. You're there when it's born and you're there when it goes out into the world. I mean, the producer is the consistent person throughout the life of the film. Yeah, other people come and go, but the producer is the consistent person. That's why, for example...
Does the producer write the storyline as well?
No, you have writers. I mean, you can be involved. I've always been involved in conceptualizing and to some degree writing, but that's quite unusual. But like in the Oscars, when the film wins Best Oscar, the producer gets the award because it is...
The work that's been done,
it's the
bringing it to
film.
life, all of that.
So you hire people to do lots of work. Of course, the director is very important. Like, if you don't have the right director, then of course the film is in trouble. So it's a highly collaborative business. You're working with lots of skilled and sometimes difficult people, and I have to be father to them all. I have to tell them, that everything's going to be okay and make sure that it is.
So there's a creative side to producing a film.
There is.
But there is the business side as well. Like you said, you measure your success in terms of how much of money you make.
Well, that's not strictly true. It's usually true because it is a commercial, but there are occasions where you're trying to win awards or you're trying to do something else. But 90% of the time it is, of course, like any business.
It has to be profitable at the end of the day. Otherwise it's deemed a flop.
Yeah.
If you don't reach your bottom line, your target in terms of covering your costs, making a profit to pay people,
if you win an Oscar and you don't cover your costs, it's not a flop. So what I'm saying is the film, there's a different angle to film, and that it is also an artistic, there is a side of it that's artistic. So it's not always as clear-cut as that. But I mean, mostly it is a commercial business.
Sure.
Yeah.
But when you come up with a storyline, who comes up with a storyline? How does it get...
Well, I work with people. So I usually work with two directors, which is Akin Omatoso, who was the director of Tell Me Sweet Something, and Craig Frymond, who did some of the other films you mentioned, most notably Material. And projects come to you in very different ways. And part of the first skill that you have to have is that you have to be able to assess, is this going to be something people are going to be interested in? So that's the first moment when somebody comes like, is this going to be something that people would like to see? You're
producing it for people at the end of the day. Do you take trends into account, industry trends, consumer interest? Sometimes there's a running theme that comes out.
I think it's really important to understand what audiences want. If you want to have box office success, I think it's quite important to be able to read where audiences are. So I think there's general rules, like if we're having a difficult time in a country or the economy in the world is difficult, people want to go to cinema and not have to deal with the weights and problems of the world. They prefer to
It's escapism.
escape
entertainment,
and be
etc.
entertained. Yeah.
Are we producing stories or movies that South Africans want to see? Is that something that you consider?
Very
What
much
do South
so.
Africans
That's the
want
only
to
thing
see?
I consider.
Okay.
Unless it's an I mean, I am doing films that are international co-productions where you're trying to design it for a worldwide audience, but usually that would have to involve an international star. You usually have to have a person that is going to attract a familiarity for the worldwide audience.
It depends on the scale of the story and the interest of the story as well.
Yeah, but I think so. They're slightly different things. If we're making a South African film, I think if you don't consider South African audience, you're a fool. They're your primary audience. You know, if you go and sell your film overseas, the first question they're going to ask you is, how well did it do in your own country?
I see.
You know, nobody's going to buy your film if it didn't do well here.
So it starts here?
It starts here, absolutely does, yeah.
What makes a South African film interesting to an international audience?
Well, I think, you know,
how do they buy into our movies?
That's a very difficult question because I think it's on a film by film. It's very difficult to collect things together. And I think partly, you know, the reason for like Long Walk to Freedom having an international star is that is one of the ways that you try and attract interest. And I don't think it always works. I think sometimes you end up falling between two stools. People go, it's not one thing or another. So, I mean, it's very difficult to say that. What is it about City of God, which is a Brazilian film that's been seen so many times, or Whale Rider? You know, as South Africans, those were totally, you know, Whale Rider was a New Zealand film. It was made for New Zealanders. There's a charm in the story, maybe. So those things are more difficult because the film industry worldwide is driven by stars. So, and most of those stars are in Hollywood. There's some British stars, but mostly it's driven by Hollywood stars. So when we go to the cinema and we look at what's on, it's very often connected to who's in it.
Sure.
So we're at a disadvantage unless we create our own stars. So we have TV stars, but we don't really have film stars. So partly what we're trying to do is also create film stars. And I think because there's new audiences in South Africa, it's exciting times because we did a film, Tell Me Sweet Something, which was aimed at what they call an urban black audience. There have been almost no films made for that audience. So partly you're trying to prove that the audience exists. And you're trying to look at who that audience is interested in terms of personalities or actors and put them in the film. And I think we did that very successfully.
To reflect the personas from that sector and
exactly,
portray those personas.
Yeah, but I also think who are people following on Twitter? Who are they interested? Who are the hot, you know, personalities? We have to take all of those things into account so that we can create our own stars. We're kind of doing it from scratch. So we've got to build all of these things as we go along. It makes it more complicated. But that's what we're trying to do. And I think in Tell Me Sweet Something, we've proved that. We've proved there are an audience for those films, and we've proved that we have people that will attract audiences to the cinema. You know? Sure.
How competitive is the local industry, Robbie?
You know, I think getting a film made is very difficult. There are incentives. I mean, government's very involved, and if they weren't, the industry would really not be doing very well. So I think the rebates from the government are very crucial to where we are, and I think that's important because actually what you're trying to do is build a cultural identity.
Do you aim to attract foreign investment when making a movie? Or
I think when it's a film that has international potential, I think there's very few films that are local that have international potential. And I think the mistake you can make is to think that that's true. You know, Americans aren't really interested in the world. It's very tough to have a film that has international appeal. And I think while it's a legitimate thing to do, and as I say, I do have projects like that, when you're doing a local film, concentrate on the local audience and make it successful, and then worry about does it have international potential after that. I think that's a very crucial thing, and I think it's a mistake people often make.
Sure.
They start with, how do we do something that'll have international appeal, and they end up with a mishmash of stuff that appeals to nobody. I mean, there's a lot of examples of that, you know.
And how competitive is the local space for producers, for writers, for directors, and for actors? I mean, I chatted to about 3 actors recently and also producers, and they said that it's really cutthroat. You have to avoid getting swallowed up in the process.
Yeah, and I think business is always like that. I don't know if it's how.
It's about being a star, about
Yeah.
reaching a certain pivotal place in your career and having that recognition in this industry. And that could be quite challenging.
That is challenging.
You can't be mediocre in this space.
You know, listen, that's an interesting thing because what is a star? So Arnold Schwarzenegger, not a fantastic actor, right? At the height of his time, he was the highest paid actor in the world.
No, they have shelf lives as well.
Because he
attached,
had a star quality. He had something in him, and you know, in a very particular way that people responded to. So star quality, it's like an X factor. What is it? How do you appeal to people? They sometimes intangible things. But getting back to your question, is it competitive? Yeah, of course it is. Of course it's competitive. You do have to be smart. You do have to make the most of opportunities. And I think you have to respect people that put money. I think often there's not enough respect for investment. I think you have to respect the investment. So you have to make decisions that will benefit the people that invest in your film so that you can give them money back so that they'll do it again. I think those are sometimes neglected ideas. You always have to respect money, I think.
Sure.
That's important.
In Africa, Nigeria is doing very well when it comes to producing movies. In terms of the volumes that's coming out, which reflects that there's a big focus on that industry in that country. Do you think what is it about Nollywood?
Well, I think it's a totally different model. I don't think that it's kind of not even really a filmmaking model. I'll tell you, it's a very specific situation. So you have to look at the history of Nigeria. People that are culturally very supportive, which I think sometimes in South Africa we're not. So they're very interested in their own languages, etc. Total absence of even television. So the television industry collapsed in Nigeria. Nigeria went through a very difficult time under military dictatorship. Its infrastructure collapsed. So amateurs started making content for DVDs because it was the only way in which they could get content into people's homes. And that's how Nollywood was born. Very particular example. Nigerian filmmakers were kind of excluded from that example and have since re-entered. And the Nigerian cinema now, which is not really Nollywood, but proper cinema, is starting to happen. So the Nollywood example isn't really a real, it's not something we could replicate because it was in the absence of stuff. It wasn't really what people would have chosen to do if all the correct infrastructure existed. Bollywood is a probably different example because what they managed to do is create a very powerful culture around cinema going.
Yeah, it has a big international appeal.
It has because there's a lot of Indian people in the world, and they've now in the diaspora. They're all over the world. So that means that actually you can have millions of people of Indian descent living in America, for example. So suddenly you have a market in America. But if you see what's happened with Bollywood is they've moved away from their traditional
genre
kind of Bollywood. They've started to become more sophisticated. They spend more money. They're more sophisticated.
I love Bollywood movies.
But it's all built around stars.
Yeah.
Same idea as Hollywood. You have to have stars because that's who people want to see, right?
Do you see yourself as a star?
No, I'm not a star. I'm on the. Luckily,
You've been in the industry for over 30 years.
Yeah, but
it's
I'm on the other side of the camera for a very
survive.
good reason. You know, I don't. I'm definitely
just
not
collect
a star.
the money.
Yeah.
Big pleasure having you with us today.
thank you.
Wish you all the best in your next movie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.